quarter two approaches, so it is time to get set up. What we're effectively doing today is kind of like a new journal setup, just in the middle of a notebook. For 2024, I'm tackling things a little bit differently, so rather than focusing on the whole year, I'm focusing on quarters, or roughly 3-month periods, and instead of months, I'm using cycles. Each cycle is 4 weeks, and then each quarter is made up of 3 cycles, plus a bonus week at the end that I'm calling Reset Week. This means that the first quarter of the year is finishing at the very end of March, and quarter 2 is starting on the 1st of April. I love the fresh slate kind of feeling that you get with the new year, and by focusing on quarters rather than just years, it means that I get to have more of these fresh starts. Obviously, there is a happy balance between the number of fresh starts you're having and actually getting stuff done, but so far I'm finding that the cycles and the quarters is working quite well. In terms of the page we're working on here though, this is effectively my quarterly overview, so it gives me a bird's eye view of what's going on in the quarter. Each of the rows is a week, and each of the columns is a day of the week, and while there are only 13 weeks in my quarter, just so that the page looks nicely balanced, I've put 14 on this spread. I'm kind of intending this layout to be one that I really just set up at the start of the quarter to kind of get my mind straight in terms of when things are happening, rather than a layout that I really come back to and refer to. I just know that I don't do very well with coming back and referring to start of journal pages, so this one will likely suffer from that as well, even though it is technically in the middle of a notebook. On that note, I did consider setting up a new journal for each quarter, but that would be 4 new journal setups every year, and that just seems a little bit excessive for how I like to plan. I'm a lot more comfortable using maybe 2 to 3 everyday journals for each year, just given the number of pages that I typically use with each month or with each cycle. I didn't want to effectively have to pad out my journal or just leave them half empty just because I was moving into a new quarter. So at this stage, I'm really aiming for 2 quarters per notebook, or half a year, which is honestly a lot more typical for what we see in our community. In terms of the decoration that I'm using on all of the layouts in this setup, I have a set of washi tape that I have had for such a long time, and I thought, no, this is silly, we actually need to get in and use this properly. I have used it a couple of times before, but not for a full journal setup, so this is your sign to use up a supply that you've been hoarding for a while. This set in particular is from the washi tape shop, and while they don't have this specific set anymore, if you wanted to grab something from their website, remember that you can use code JashiiCorrin for 10% off your order if you want to. We love savings. The quality of this tape is excellent, but I will say that I wish that the color palette across the tapes in the set was a little bit more consistent. There are actually 5 different tapes in this set, so I've tried to use all of them throughout the layouts, but the actual color palette within each individual tape changes a little bit. For instance, the tape that I'm using on the calendar versus the tape that I'm using to look like it's behind the calendar, one of them is a lot more pink tone and the other one has a lot more green and orange. This meant that when it came to finding color matches for my supplies, it was a little bit difficult, and I did end up with quite an eclectic bunch of pens. Of course, all of the equipment is linked in the description box below, but in terms of that washi tape that I've put on the calendar, this is to mark where I will have less or possibly even no time to get things done. These are periods that I'm going away, the first one being for Go Wild, and then the second one being a trip to Melbourne to help my parents declutter. The nice part about this tape on the calendar is that it serves as a visual reminder of the time that I'm going to be less available, but it also actually just limits me from writing too much in the boxes, so I literally can't schedule too much on these days. I wanted to use this tape in particular because it helps that pink highlight on the top bar kind of look like it actually belongs on the page, because while that pink matches the butterfly tape on the calendar really well, it's not really highlighted so well in the tape we have at the bottom. One of the things that I really like to do with this kind of tape is rip off the edge to make it look kind of torn, a little bit more organic, and then I put all of those pieces that I've ripped off in the back of my journal in what I call my washi graveyard. I cannot for the life of me remember who I saw this idea from, but I love making these little ladders of tape. This page is purely decorational. I really could just, take these little offcuts and throw them away, but I just like to stick them in the back here because I think it looks pretty. With the overview done though, it's time to get into the next layout, but before we set that one up, we're just gonna have a look at how quarter one's pages went. When it came to planning out quarter two setup, I wanted to make sure I went through all of these pages and really considered what worked, what didn't, how my needs might be different, anything like that. And notably, as I kind of mentioned, I'm really bad at using start of journal pages, so in knowing that about myself, I didn't want to set up too many when I was doing my quarter two setup. While I had a lot of good intentions with these pages, a lot of them did not get utilized as much as I wanted them to. So I've really tried to just bring over the ones that I thought would be the most helpful for the quarter ahead. That being said though, I loved the decorative style on these layouts. I thought the black and the gold and the white worked really nice together. And I don't see not using these pages as a failing of any kind, but more so a learning opportunity to figure out what does work for me. Talking about learning opportunities, I completely set up the quarterly overview on the wrong page. It was actually supposed to be one page ahead, which either meant that a lot of the sketching out that I've done for future pages in this setup was either going to become obsolete, or I had to change around my page order. I opted for the latter because I wasn't going to sketch things out again, so I did have to consider how I could change up my page ordering but still make it make sense. The layout that we're setting up here though is a projects and routine spread, with projects on the left and routines on the right. The project space is really just going to be a list. I want to keep track of the projects that I've been working on, what I've been getting done, kind of so that when I get to the end of the quarter, I can look back at this page and see all of the stuff that I actually accomplished, or at the very least what I was working on. I often have quite a few projects that I'm working on at once, but I don't necessarily keep those in mind when I go to take on new projects, or goals, or anything like that. So I think that having a list of all of those projects that I'm currently working on, and also the ones that I've already finished, is just going to be helpful to make sure that I'm not piling too much onto my plate. In terms of the routines layout, this is similar to the one that I had in quarter one, but effectively I'm going to set it up in an Alistair method. So next to each of the green dots that I'm putting down the left-hand side, that's where I'm going to be writing in the routines that I want to build, whether they be weekly routines, cyclic routines, whatever else. And then on the very right-hand side of the page, I'm going to have a column for each of the week numbers in that quarter. So 1 through 12, and then R for reset week. That way I can put in a dot with my Zig clean color dot marker to indicate which week I want to be doing those things in, and then I can check them off once they have been completed. Rather than bring over the routines that I had in the first iteration of this page, I do want to kind of go through them again and just make sure they're all still things that I want to be doing. So I won't be filling them in here, but I will be filling them in before the quarter starts. On to the next spread, and this one is going to be the most simple to set up because it's literally just some decoration and some headers. These two pages are going to be used for my before XYZ lists. So before Go Wild and before my trip to Melbourne. I like to make these types of pages in my journal to get myself organized before I go on any trip, and I figured to help make myself as organized as possible, I'd put them in my start of quarter setup. At this stage, I'm not too sure what actually needs to be organized before each of these, so I'm not populating the pages with anything, just leaving them open so that they can be used in the way that they need to be. In my quarter one setup, I had a separate spread for each of the months of the quarter so that I could plan out my content calendars. While I didn't dislike these layouts, I didn't utilize them as well as I could, and thus having 3 separate spreads for them seemed like a little bit much. Instead, for quarter 2, I decided to condense this, so having 4 months on one spread. Now you might be a little bit confused, like why am I putting monthly things in here when I've just said that I'm working on cycles for everything? When it comes to my content releases, in particular those for my team memberships, those ones are one of the few things that I still do on a monthly basis. Because my team memberships get things like lettering sheets, exclusive videos, exclusive live streams, and all of those are done on a monthly rotation, it makes more sense to have those with monthly calendars specifically. Along the top of the spread, I have mini calendars for the months of April through to July. Even though this quarter is only going to be for those first 3 months, I decided to put the 4th one here because it pays to plan ahead. The calendar is really just going to be used to show when my video content is coming out, so a darker dot for any of the content that is going to be kind of publicly released, and then a light orange dot for any of the video content that is for team members only. Underneath those though, I'm going to have checklists for each of the pieces of content that come out, mainly for my team memberships, but I've also put in things like our book club and our community hangouts, which are open to anybody. Each of those I'm going to be putting in with a dot marker circle again, so that I can check them off as I've either prepared the materials or as they've happened, depending on the type of content. If you did want to join our membership community, or the team with a capital T, then there are links in the description box to how you can get involved. We have a variety of price points and perks, but all of the information is down there. In terms of putting in the checklists on this page though, I only wanted to fill in the first one, just because that's the only calendar that I actually have confirmed. The other ones I have the general idea of when perks are coming out, but I want to know the specific dates before I go and write them in. Now as the content calendars are pretty much set up though, it's time to flip on over to another work-related spread. On this one, I have the A Year of Planning challenge on the left, which is a year-long challenge where you make different layouts in your notebook. And then on the right-hand side, I have a space to plan out the Discord Digest and just a general ideas space. The Discord Digest is effectively a roughly weekly summary of the stuff that's been going on in our Discord server. That one is free to join and we would love to have you with us. It is also linked in the description box. But effectively it's just a place where we can all kind of hang out, talk about journals, creativity, whatever else. But I like to try and make sure that I'm posting little updates in there as to what's been happening in the server, just in case we've had new spaces open up for things that we want to talk about, if we have updates for the book club, hangouts coming up, anything like that. I love the idea of having a kind of dashboard with these sticky notes, which I can just jot down notes on and then replace the sticky note after I've actually put out the digest post. But in terms of the Year of Planning challenge on the left hand side, this one is again using the Alistair method. So a space to write out what each of the prompts are for each of the weeks of the year, and then a place to check off once I've organized the picture, the caption, and posted it both in the Discord and over on Instagram. Obviously some of these weeks are already done, but I liked the idea of having the full list there and also having a kind of record of achievement in terms of the ones that are already finished, kind of just to keep me motivated to get the rest of them done. I don't particularly enjoy writing Instagram captions, but they're kind of necessary for this challenge, so I just need something to kind of hold me accountable to getting the stuff posted. That challenge does have its own separate video, which funnily enough is also linked in the description box. So much goodness to be found down there. But after this layout, we're on to some planning pages, in particular planning for my cyclic setups, and also planning for my new journal setup. Quarter 2 is going to be the last quarter in this journal in particular, so I want to have a space to plan out my next journal setup, but something I've also been missing is those cyclic planning spaces. So planning out my themes, my color palettes, what spreads do I want to include, what lettering styles am I going to use. I didn't think I would miss it as much as I have, but because I have been missing it, we're bringing it back. Again, there are only 3 cycles in a quarter, but to make this page balanced, and also because I thought it might be useful to have, that 4th space is going to be for new journal planning, or Nujo. So what kind of style or aesthetic elements do I want to use in the setup of those pages when I get around to it? In terms of the quarter 3 setup planning though, that's going on the right hand side, and I have 4 columns for note taking. One of them is for stuff that I like or that worked. The next one is for stuff that I didn't like or it didn't work. After that we have my needs for that quarter in particular, and then the last column is for ideas. I like to use these 4 different kind of questions to prompt myself when it comes to reflecting on my journaling practice, mainly just to make sure that when I do my next setup, it's as tailored to what I need from my journal as possible. At the bottom of that page, I'm also putting in some little thumbnails of what I want those pages to look like. And typically in setting up a layout like this, I would actually keep it just black and white, because I end up going and adding a lot of color when I'm doing like the color palettes for each of the cycles. But because of the aforementioned mishaps with the placement of the overview page, I already had washi tape on this one and I didn't want to waste it, so we are making this one themed with the rest of the setup. Flipping back to have a look at what we've set up in this one though, although I had some difficulties with getting the decorative style to work in the way I wanted it to, in particular with the color paletting regarding some of those tapes, I am feeling quite optimistic about these layouts. They're a little bit more pared down than what I usually do, I think. Some of them are a lot more simple, and I have been very mindful to only pick the layouts that I think I'm going to use. So I'm looking forward to getting into the next quarter and having these to help me be as organized as possible. If you wanted to check out my previous quarterly setup though, and the thoughts behind what I put into that, then this video is the next one to check out. As said, I thought that the decorative style in that one was excellent. The pages came together really nicely. So click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.